Welcome to Digital Garden State, a podcast by the New Jersey Health Information Management Systems Society.
Welcome to the next installment of our New Jersey HIMSS podcast series, where we're exploring topics surrounding digital transformation initiatives within healthcare. New Jersey HIMSS is a consortium of healthcare professionals, providers, and vendors who are committed to promoting constant improvement in the use of information technology within the healthcare industry. I'm your host, Jim Hennessy. I serve as a board member for our New Jersey chapter, and I'm also the CEO of E4 Services, a healthcare consulting firm. Today's podcast is presented by one of our chapter sponsors, Comply Assistant. Comply Assistant is located in Colstead, New Jersey, and offers governance, risk, and compliance software and services to healthcare organizations of all sizes. Comply Assistant helps clients across the U.S. fill resource gaps through their virtual CISO service offerings. They conduct independent, unbiased audits of HIPAA and several cybersecurity frameworks, all efficiently managed in their GRC platform. Their CEO is Jerry Blass, who is a prior colleague of ours on the New Jersey HIMSS board and currently serves as our co-chair of our chapter's Security, Privacy, and Compliance Committee. To learn more about them, visit their website at www.complyassistant.com. In our prior podcasts, we were able to explore digital transformation from the perspectives of chief medical information officers across New Jersey. Today, we're excited to have as our guest one of the nation's top leaders in digital transformation. Angela Yochem serves as a Chief Transformation and Digital Officer at Novant Health and also serves as Chief Operating Officer and General Manager of Novant Health Enterprises. Novant Health is an integrated network of hospitals, physician clinics, and outpatient facilities that delivers a seamless and convenient healthcare experience to communities in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. The Novant Health Network consists of more than 1,800 physicians and over 35,000 team members who provide care at more than 800 locations, including 15 hospitals and hundreds of outpatient facilities and physician clinics. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
There's so many areas I'd love to get your perspective on, but just for the sake of our listeners and ourselves, why don't we start with learning a little bit more about yourself, and if you could share some of your background on yourself, Novant, and your role there.
Sure. Thanks so much. Well, I started my career a long time ago as a very deep technologist. I early on had an opportunity to build some of the largest transactional systems in the world, design, build, launch for a number of very large brand name companies, some of which for which I worked. Some of the companies I worked as an employee, and other companies I was a consultant when I was with IBM. And this experience taught me quite a bit about scale. This experience early on in my career allowed me to work at a time when many of the capabilities that were required by a given company were not commercially available from a software company. So we had to build it ourselves. So if you look back on, my patents or anything like that, that's all from that same era. We had to do it all from scratch. It was a tremendous proving ground. And, certainly in the middle of the dot-com boom, we were all having a lot of fun. And that's where I started. And over time, I became addicted to scale, and I became addicted to solving the problems that come with extraordinarily large scale. And there's nothing more complex than systems that have components that don't behave deterministically. And so, people don't behave deterministically. So those problems, when I say I became addicted to solving problems with larger and larger scale systems, starting incorporating people into those problem sets became where I love to play. So I moved out of those deep tech roles into more management of large scale tech teams, large scale distributed teams, still largely in the architecture space. So I was able to identify solution sets, both those that are commercially available and those that needed to be grown in-house or perhaps co-created with a variety of third-party types. And again, roles just continued to scale and scale and scale. And ultimately, I moved from transforming systems to transforming divisions, and now to transforming businesses and entire industries. One hopes, right? That's what we all are here to talk about, right? So so that's been sort of the progression of my career, and I've had a variety of C-level jobs and a variety of large companies, and most recently, Novant Health as you mentioned, hired me about 4.5 years ago. The CEO and the board and other members of the executive team recognized that the traditional technology model, of which Novant Health had an excellent example in-house, the traditional technology model, while solid and while important, was not going to be sufficient to respond to the changing consumer expectations and to keep up with the advances that are happening in medicine and science. We couldn't just run a healthcare IT shop the way it had always been done. And so they decided to bring me on board as someone who had a history of significant transformation in a variety of industries. And they brought me on with a new title. And that title was Chief Digital and Technology Officer. And the CIO position reported into me, as well as CTO and a variety of other initial positions. We created a number of new competencies, so Chief Data Officer and all of those sorts of things. And ultimately, the role expanded to include all clinical informatics, also our digital health line of business, including operations for the entire digital health line of business. All on-demand services of all sorts are part of my world. And new business growth. And that's when I became Chief Transformation and Digital Officer. And now, as you may have seen in a recent press release, we have a spinoff, Novant Health Enterprises, that is all about commercialization and productization and commercialization of a lot of those differentiating capabilities that are very, very difficult to build for members of the healthcare ecosystem. And so we, in commercializing many of these capabilities, will be able to help expand the reach and amplify some of those capability sets that we've been so focused on delivering in the last few years. And for that role, I'm also the chief operating officer and general manager of that Novant Health Enterprises organization. So the letters continue to expand.
That's quite a number of hats that you're wearing there. Well, congratulations on that announcement. And that really love to kind of work back through the piece, because that really shows a lot of organizations are just struggling to service their own organizations and just get to that point of feeling good there. The fact that you're able to get to that point and then look to see how you can bring some of those capabilities out to the market is pretty significant. So best of luck with that. That's great news. And maybe I want to jump back on a couple of things I picked up on there as you talked about throughout your career, focusing on scale. And certainly, as I referenced Novant as an organization, that's certainly a place of scale within there. As you came on board, what have been some of the challenges or things that you found in trying to scale care delivery or that patient experience, that consumerism within that organization?
Well, I should say right off the bat that I was very fortunate coming in, because Novant Health had invested significantly in foundational technologies. So, for example, we had a single Epic implementation across 800 plus locations across 37,000 team members, and there was no, that foundation, as many of your listeners know, is so critical. So I didn't have to worry about modernizing that piece. So that gave us a foundation from which we could build a lot of remarkable capabilities. The key for us was in getting our hands on all that beautiful clinical data that lived inside of Epic, and operational data that lived inside of Epic. Epic provides a number of mechanisms by which we can access that data, but we wanted to be able to operate on it quite freely without having to go through the Epic interfaces. And so what we've done is we've moved all of our Epic data into an Azure-based data store in the cloud. It's a data lake model. And that allows, and we've of course built a robust API layer that sits in front of it. Well, what that means is that as we partner with a variety of third parties who do very specialized things, or as we build as part of our cognitive computing team, data science team, build our own in-house analysis tools, we can operate on that data at will. And by the way, it's not just that data that sits in that data lake, right? It's all the data that streams in from a variety of devices. It's all the behavioral data that comes in from a variety of sources. And that is where we get a true truly differentiated insight that we can provide to get to faster diagnosis, to get to more personalized treatment plans in a way that doesn't interfere with, the way in which our physicians and advanced practitioners are providing care, but allows them to be alerted to risk factors or potential items of interest in a patient's history that otherwise may not have been obvious just looking at the notes in the traditional sense. So this has been it was all unlocked by availability of data.
And that's one of the things I think over the past years, particularly since high tech and the implementation of the modernization of the EMRs, it's no longer now a shortage of data. It's how do you use it? How do you govern it? What are some of the things that you mentioned having a chief data officer, but what are some of the other things that you've done within your organization? As I talked to other organizations struggling with how do they put a governance in place for it? How do they get to that next stage? What are some of the things that worked well within your organization?
Well, of course, there are a number of ways we can manage, we manage this. First, there is an organizational alignment. So our chief data officer is responsible for not only the data engineering and infrastructure of the data estate, but also all integration as well as data science. So we only have two teams. We even have, I should say, we have only two analytics teams that live outside of the chief data officer's world. One is clinical analytics and one is in finance. And I'm happy for those teams to live outside of our world. But obviously they're operating on data that is still stored in our architecture, right? So it's still very easy to manage. So there's an organizational control aspect. Then secondly, we have a number of different governance bodies. So we have a privacy office that lives with our chief legal officer. So the privacy office is responsible for all things related to patient data, patient privacy. So they set policy around and create governance constructs around the management of patient data and privacy thereof. We have, likewise, we have committees that are essentially, if you think about it in terms of product owners, product data owners, so that the people and culture team, which is what we call our HR team, they're focused on all of the team member data and employee health data and things related to, that they again have to be held with in extreme confidence and treated as, extremely private. They manage a lot of the specifics around that data. And because this is a team that has a lot of demands on it, we also have a governance group that is made up of executive team members, so those that report directly to our CEO. And that governance body focuses on prioritizing the work that team does, because ungoverned, that team could grow to 1,000 people, and still be plenty busy, because the opportunity and the significance of the value that we get from the work we do with our data is such that, the demand is nearly unlimited. So over time, as we continue to grow that team, we also look very closely at the return we get from that work, and that's how we make decisions around what work goes through to that team.
And that's all key things. You think about some organizations that are just struggling to meet base reporting needs and think it's just IT. You've built full organizational alignment and some distributed use of that. So that's tremendous. One thing I'd just like to stay on this topic before switching to a couple others is you talked about a couple of interesting pieces about the introduction of data sciences into it, as well as trying to bring some of the analysis back into the care delivery. Any examples of where those two things have made an impact?
Yeah, several examples. Broadly speaking, I'll tell you that we can predict a handful of major health events before they happen. And the models for each health event type, differ. But those predictions have changed the way we think about follow-up with our patients and engagement with our patients, particularly those that we perceive to be at high risk for a health event. So I'll give you several examples of that. I'll give you a very simple example first, because it's one that will be familiar, I think, to everyone in your audience. For those Epic users, you know that Epic has an out-of-the-box suicide prevention module, and it's designed to predict the likelihood of a patient attempting suicide upon discharge from the emergency department. All right, so this is particularly interesting for those behavioral health patients. We discharge them, and that's out of the box. And out of the box, and I may get some of these percentages wrong, but I'll give you approximate numbers. Out of the box, that is about 75% accurate, which is pretty good. That's pretty good. Our data science team first created a homegrown solution to expand that using R code. So if those of you familiar with R, the data scientists love it. And they were able to create models that got us to about 89% accuracy. So that's pretty exciting, right? Because that gives us a lot more confidence about how we follow up with those patients. Now we've just launched an AI-based solution, again, built by the data science team, in concert with a partner, an AI software company that has decided to co-create with us. We've now launched a module that we believe is starting at the low 90% accuracy. And because it is a learning algorithm, it will only get more accurate over time. So that's a simple example of how building out a data science competency can give you some quick wins, as well as some extraordinarily sophisticated wins that make a real difference in patients' quality of life or life itself. So it's investment well worth making, in my opinion, to hire a few data scientists.
Yeah, that's tremendous. That's exciting to hear, being able to now put that information right to use in that type of tangible way. That's pretty exciting. Let me use some of the things you mentioned there as far as how you're able to then engage and interact with the patients a little bit more, to talk about. You mentioned as you came in, Epic was already in place, already from a care delivery model that was already in a good place, probably always looking to improve upon that. But how have you been focusing on what areas within the patient experience outside that care model, that care part, have you been focused on as you're looking as part of your solutions?
Yeah, well, obviously when we think about delivering care to patients, yes, of course, there's a quality aspect, and that's what we've been talking about up to this point. And I'd love to talk more about some of those things because they're really cool and I'm very geeky. So maybe we'll get time to that today. Otherwise, we'll talk about it offline. But if the patients can't access that high quality care, that's a problem. And so we have another focus that's all about providing access to care. Part of that is engaging patients the way they have been trained to engage with a number of other entity types. So all of us, if we've been trained about, how do we order food? How do we travel? How do we manage our finances? How do we manage our bank accounts if we have bank accounts? How do we engage with our communities and the schools that our kids go to? And how do we engage with our governments, our local governments, our federal governments? This is a training that's been going on for, years. And we're not only training our patients, the society in which we live is not only training our patients to engage in a primarily digital fashion, but it's also training our patients to have a more cohesive and consistent engagement with the various entities that are important in the patient's life. So what that means is our digital tools need to be as engaging as Amazon is for our patients. Let's take Amazon for a moment. Amazon knows, so I've been using a Kindle now for, goodness, however long it's been out. So what is that, 15 years, 20? I don't know. So I've always had one. And, thousands of books. So they know everything I read. Fair disclosure, my girls share the Kindle, so there was a lot of young adult stuff in there for a few.
Don't get blamed for everything. That's it.
Just to be clear, there's some noise in that data, but they know everything I read. They know what I watch on Amazon Prime. I have the Echo devices in my house, so they probably have a good handle on conversations that happen in my private home. There's actually quite a bit of scary things there, but there's a tremendous amount of data, and Amazon is really good at using it very well to target, to send me things that are interesting to me. And that's, that those methods are as old as the hills, but they've become more sophisticated with the advent of, more advanced computing capability and, the explosion of data that's available to them. There's an expectation on the part of a consumer that retailers, for example, know them. And it's frustrating when they engage with an entity like a healthcare company, and the healthcare company doesn't seem to know them. That's frustrating. And I would dare say that many patients, many of our consumers can't put their finger on why they're frustrated. But that's why, in large part, that's why they're frustrated. It's just hard to engage in the management of one's health and wellness. We put a lot of procedural blocks up, and for good reason in many cases, right? I mean, there's some, obviously regulatory requirements and, things that we're doing that are focused on and optimized for patient safety, and all of that is valid and real and will continue. But there are other ways in which we can make it easier for our patients to engage. For example, we recently launched something called Novant Health Now, and it's essentially a digital care platform that serves as a one-stop shop for our patients. It acts as, so we've always had a physician, not always, but for years we've had like a physician finder. Everyone has that, right? And we think ours is really sophisticated, and it is, and we partnered with a third party on it, and it looks great. But now if you want to get matched with a physician, this is like a matchmaking service. So we'll match you to a physician. It's not just like, hey, you want to find a physician and here's a list and good luck. We'll create matches. We'll create percentage matches, and we don't have any swiping right or left, but there is a little bit more sophistication to that sort of match. We also have a number of chatbots that allow our patients to ask very quick questions and get very quick answers, and that is useful. How many times at 10 o'clock at night are you thinking about something and you just you have a question, and what are the chances you're going to get somebody in a healthcare company, if you want to call them on the phone, or you send an email and how do you even find the right email? And, one hopes that you have a good relationship with your primary care physician's office and can use my chart messaging or some other mechanism like that to communicate, but you're still waiting until the next day. And maybe it's a simple question. And the only way you're going to get your question answered if your healthcare company does not have that sort of mechanism in place is to go to Dr. Google. And there's nothing wrong with Dr. Google. Well, there's a lot wrong with Dr. Google, but at least there's some, I don't begrudge Dr. Google, because that allows our patients to gain answers to questions that they might need. And if there's something going on and they need to know if it's serious and it needs to be addressed at that moment in time, doing a quick search could tell them. But we can also tell them in our chatbots. So that's just silly things, that have been available for a long time in other industries that we can bring forward that just create a more familiar and comfortable engagement mechanism for our patients. So we're focused on that piece as well.
Well, that's tremendous. And I think two things that come out of that. One is, for many of us who are in the healthcare IT industry, living in that industry, bringing your perspective from coming from other industries has helped with that different thought process towards that consumer focus. The question I have is, are you seeing, as you're starting to roll these out, any differences in generational adoption within your consumer base there? Are you seeing, and maybe how you're overcoming that?
Well, we learned so much over the last 2 years. So 2 years ago, we've had a robust virtual care, on-demand care capability set for a while. So we had all the operations in place. Like I said, that's part of my digital health team. When we had to take the entire medical group and make them available through scheduled virtual visits, we had the mechanisms in place to turn that on overnight. The only reason it took us 48 hours is because we needed to train all of the physicians and advanced practitioners in the medical group how to use the platforms. So that took about 48 hours. And so we were immediately up and running. We had many days where we had 25, close to 30,000 virtual visits a day. We've evened out, I think, around 2,000 a day now. I mean, because all the clinics are back open and have been for a while. But in in being forced, in having our patients be forced to use that mechanism, because they had no other option to receive care other than go to the emergency department for a period of time when everything shut down, we learned quite a bit about adoption. And what we found is that the boomers were very enthusiastic adopters of virtual care. We found them to be more, I think, I'm going to speculate here, but my speculation is they think a lot more frequently about their health than the 20-somethings. Because 20-somethings are pretty healthy, just in general. A little more carefree. I remember those days vaguely. But the people who are in their 60s and 70s and 80s are thinking quite a bit on a daily basis about their health, and they have a lot of questions. And being able to use these mechanisms that are fairly intuitive, fairly easy to use, we'd like to believe, to allow them to receive care on demand, that's actually lovely for them, right? And they realize that, and they've quite liked it. And because they're also simultaneously being a little more careful than the rest of us in terms of, well, I say other generations in general. I personally am a germaphobe, so I didn't go out for 2 years practically, but maybe not quite that bad, but they're being very careful. So they don't want to go into an office, even when the office is opened up. If they get a chance to do, a virtual visit, they'd rather do that. So that's been an interesting learning. Now, as in terms of the Novant Health Now and using these fancy tools to do matching of the matchmaking with your physician of choice, I think I think we're seeing more adoption on the younger end of folks. But, in fairness, a lot of our patients who are older, I mean, we still have the traditional means by which they can engage us and find a physician, right? And
they may be set with their providers already.
And they're likely set with the providers already. Although, for example, my parents just moved to Charlotte. They moved here from Tennessee, which we don't have a presence in Tennessee. Novant Health doesn't. So I got a chance to see through the eyes of my parents who have, I should say, fair disclaimer, always been extraordinarily technically proficient and very savvy. But still, generationally, they're late 70s, moved to Charlotte, and had no problem. They love my chart. They love the expansion, the Novant, my Novant expansions we've done to my chart. They love the ease with which they've been able to get questions answered, and it's been interesting. And there's some things they don't like as much. So, for example, as you know, and as everyone on your podcast knows, there are requirements about being able to test results get immediately projected to the patient, right? So the patient sometimes sees test results before the provider sees test results, and that's a requirement. That's a regulatory requirement, right? We have no choice. We have to do that. That's a little uncomfortable for my parents to see that, because they're savvy enough to see the MyChart message. They test result. Oh, great. Let's look at the new test result. In they go, and I don't know what this means. Is this good? Is this bad? Because they're very technically proficient and very smart and highly educated, but they're not physicians. So, they don't know what some of these test results mean. So, so I think that's felt a little disjointed to them. But, that's probably something that every generation feels to some degree.
Yeah. No, interesting. Yeah, they're running to Dr. Google, as you mentioned, before they're hearing from their own provider on the interpretation for that. So, well, that's great. Well, this has been a great conversation. Before I wrap, I'd love to get your thoughts going back to as you came into Novant and as you set the strategy and tactics for those organizations that maybe aren't as advanced in establishing their transformation initiatives. Any recommendations on where to get started or things that they should focus on first?
I'm going to answer that in a couple of different ways. And I'm going to tell you what they are so I don't forget the second one as I go. So the first thing I'd like to address is culture. And the second thing I'd like to address is the practice. So culturally, one of the things that attracted me to Novant Health is the understanding on the part of the board, the CEO, and the rest of the executive team that that business innovation, care innovation was extraordinarily intertwined with technology advances. And they were looking for someone who could come in and be a partner in that innovation of, so understanding that healthcare is an industry under transformation just in general, which I guess in fairness, what industry is not under transformation right now? But understanding that healthcare certainly is, the way in which we are getting paid is changing, the expectations of consumers is changing, regulatory landscape continues to change, et cetera, right? So they were willing to not just bring someone in so that that person could sit in a box and fix things, but bring someone in to be a partner, a business partner, sitting at the executive team table and participating in solving the most difficult problems that our system is addressing. And that willingness and that inclusive spirit, that willingness to learn from external entities, that was so intriguing to me. And by the way, I'm not the only executive team member that came from outside of healthcare. Our chief commercial officer is a former banking executive. Our chief administrative officer is a former very well-known litigator. Even our chief medical officer, who is a practicing brain surgeon, is a former aerospace engineer. So here we have a guy who's a rocket scientist and a brain surgeon. So we're very fortunate. So it's been, I think culturally, it's important that leadership teams understand that diversity of thought is a true differentiator. And if you don't have diversity of experience and diversity of thought on your executive team, and the people making the biggest decisions for your system have all only ever been in healthcare and they're all MDs, as brilliant as they no doubt are, that's a lot of sameness. So being willing to be humble and to learn from other perspectives has been extraordinary. I should add, probably, speaking of being humble, when you come on board to a company where a lot of people are MDs or MD PhDs, that's also a humbling experience when one neither has an MD nor a PhD. But it's a fabulous, because everyone is so smart and accomplished. It's wonderful. So the second thing I think is more operational in nature that I'd recommend, and that is to change if your engagement model is a very traditional one. In other words, you're thinking about your technology estate and your data estate as being something that you must first, that you're optimizing for stability only and protecting against change. What you are doing is you are denying your patients an opportunity to learn that they have a major heart health event that's about to happen. You're denying your patients an opportunity to access care in a way that may not be available through commercial means right now. So you have to build it in-house. You're denying your patients experiences that are to be expected now. I'll give you another example. Our cancer patients that require infusions, we have a brand new, gleaming, gorgeous cancer center with an infusion room that is beautiful. It looks like a spa and, views of uptown Charlotte and all the rest of it. There's no waiting room in that. So when a patient comes in for the day and maybe sees their hematologist, maybe sees their oncologist, and they're finally coming in for their transfusion, their infusion, they walk straight to the chair at the appointed time. So it is an AI-based scheduling mechanism that we co-created with IQ. It's been amazing. So these are the sorts of things that if you're not creative, you're not willing to try those new things that are going to radically change how a patient thinks about, or how a patient expands on his or her willingness to manage their own health and wellness with you, becoming part of their care team with you, and making it as easy as possible, then you are not serving your patients, even if your Epic system is super rock solid. There's just so much more to be done. And so I think that expanding mindset and willingness do creative engineering work is very important.
Those are both great perspectives, and this conversation has been outstanding. Thank you so much for this. I'd love to keep going on, but I know that we're hitting the time here, and look forward to hopefully having a chance to talk more on other topics we didn't get a chance to talk to today. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great to hear those insights. And then to our audience, thank you for making time to listen with us. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to us as much as we enjoyed having this conversation. In closing here, please check out all of the podcasts for interesting information on information technology topics through your favorite podcast platform. On behalf of the New Jersey HIMSS chapter, Angela, thank you for joining us today. And to our audience, thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you.